if your priority is lowering your cholesterol or losing weight, like how do we, understanding that there's no one size fits all plant-based diet. We talked about athletes. We talked about some general principles. How do you modify your approach to your plant-based diet to, achieve weight loss or lower those markers?
Usually when I talk about cholesterol lowering, I point to a series of recommendations from an MD in Canada called Dr. David Jenkins. And he has developed what's called the portfolio diet. Some people may have heard of this before. It's a plant-based dietary pattern, and it focuses more on what you're adding. It's got 4 steps to it, and it's been clinically shown in randomized controlled trials to lower your cholesterol by 30-odd%. And really, that's not going full plant. That's coming from an omnivorous diet. So if you were to go full plant and tap into these 4 recommendations even more, then the cholesterol lowering could arguably be above 30%. And I've certainly seen that with a number of people I've worked with. So the first recommendation of the 4 in the portfolio diet, and I'll give you a PDF. I have a beautiful PDF summary of this from Dr. David Jenkins. First step is a couple of small handfuls of nuts per day. So that could be walnuts, could be pistachios, could be almonds, it could be a serve of nut butter, which is a tablespoon or 2.
It's interesting. I wouldn't intuitively associate those with lowering cholesterol.
So let me tell you what's happening there. Nuts consistently have been shown in the literature to lower cholesterol. And the reason for that is their unsaturated fat content, particularly the polyunsaturated fats, which, as opposed to saturated fat, which increases cholesterol, unsaturated fats, particularly the polyunsaturated fats, lower cholesterol. So that's what's happening there. The second recommendation in the portfolio diet is to have at least 2 to 3 serves of plant protein per day, ideally with a few of those being from soy foods. So this overall could be 2 or 3 serves from lentils, chickpeas, tofu, tempeh, these sorts of foods. The reason for a recommendation to include some soy foods within that, edamame, for example, or tofu, is that they do have a particularly good way of lowering cholesterol. And
that's unique to soy?
That's unique to soy, and it's large. It's probably driven actually through polyphenols. The phytoestrogens, which is what everyone sort of refers to them as, they're actually isoflavones, which are polyphenols. And it does seem that about 1 in 2 people have a particular microbiome composition where they can convert these compounds into a compound called equol, which is providing many benefits throughout the body. So 2 to 3 serves of plant protein being tip number 2. And remember that this is, for most people, coming at the expense of red meat and chicken. The third recommendation is to have 5 serves of fruits and vegetables per day. 5 serves of fruits and vegetables per day, which is well above what the average intake is. And with a bias towards fruits and vegetables that have a lot of soluble fiber, viscous fiber, that pulls bile out of the digestive system, and in doing that helps to lower cholesterol. These sort of viscous foods are like eggplant, okra. We've got berries are another great one. Apples. So these sorts of foods. And then the fourth tip is, or fourth recommendation within this portfolio diet, is the consumption of plant sterols. So these are a phytochemical that essentially blocks the absorption of cholesterol. And you can do this. There are some products that are fortified with these plant sterols, but probably the best and easiest way to do this, because you need 2 grams of these plant sterols per day to be clinically effective, that's shown in randomized controlled trials, is to take a supplement. And there's a bunch of different brands offering them, and they're pretty much always at 2 grams per serve because that is the clinically proven dose. So those are the 4 sort of recommendations that on the aggregate lead to a 30% reduction in your LDL cholesterol, which is the atherogenic cholesterol that contributes to the fatty plaque being laid down in our arteries and then a heart attack or a stroke. I would say, because that can be quite a significant drop if you're currently on medications, you should be doing this under the supervision of your physician. You should at least let them know that, look, I'm going to be changing my diet, and you could point to this PDF that I will provide.
At which point the doctor says, go for it. It's not going to make any difference. Your statin is always going to be your statin.
Right. And you might be the first person that goes back and surprises them. But the point of keeping them across it is that it may well affect your dose of your medication.
Right. It seems like these are, well, 2 things. First, by eating these foods, you're kind of crowding out the other foods that might take up space on your plate. So it's not about what you're eliminating. It's about focusing on these new things. And then suddenly there's no room for all those other things that are elevating your cholesterol. But beyond that, with the exception of maybe amping up your fruit and vegetable intake, these seem like principles that are good for anybody, whether you're trying to lower your cholesterol or not.
100%.
Yeah.
And, overall, it's just shifting people to a whole food, plant-based dietary pattern. It's just that it has, that specific protocol has been tried and tested and has shown to result in this very clinically meaningful drop in cholesterol, which is equivalent to low-dose statins. So that 30% reduction is very significant. For the average person, that's taking their cholesterol from 130, which, as we established, is well above optimal, down to 90 or around 90, which is, moving in a very favorable direction.
And this is something that has been proven out. Plenty of people have done this, and
a lot of people
effectively lower their...
Many different studies tried and tested. And in fact, it's so tried and tested that most physicians, if presented with this, will be well aware of it. It's a very commonly understood protocol and has now influenced some of the national cholesterol lowering dietary guidelines.
Oh, that's good to hear.
Yeah.
How would this differ if weight loss is the priority beyond the obvious, like maybe reduce your portions? Like what are the kind of tweaks that you're going to make if that's your goal?
Firstly, understanding calorie density is important. In my book, I separate foods into sort of low calorie density, medium calorie density, high calorie density, and very high. And the low calorie dense foods are pretty much all of your fruits and vegetables, other than, say, dates and avocados, which are very healthy foods, but are just a bit more calorie dense. So in that low calorie sort of food table, I have all the fruits and vegetables. It's got the dark leafy greens. It's got the cruciferous vegetables like broccoli and cabbage and broccolini. It's got pretty much all of your various fruits. It's got mushrooms, and it also has tofu in there. And usually if someone comes to me and they're wanting to lose weight, let's say that's their goal, that's right for them. First I check, are they eating according to sort of the plant-based food pyramid that I have in there, or has a whole lot of ultra-processed foods snuck in, which sometimes can happen.
In which case, you just remove those and you barely have to worry about anything else, and it takes care of itself.
Right. Those are hyperpalatable, and they're driving that excess consumption. And we can't control the environment around us, but we can try as best as possible to control the environment in our 4 walls and at least make it harder, create more resistance to consuming those foods. So if they're not in the house, if the ice cream's not there, you have to overcome a lot of resistance to jump into the car when you get the craving. Calorie density back to those 4 different sort of groups of plant-based foods, whole plant-based foods, my recommendation is to really load up on those fruits and vegetables, particularly before your main meal, as a way of filling up, and it will improve your satiety before you get more of the calorie-dense foods on your plate. And one of the sort of superstars that often people are surprised by here is potato.
Yeah.
It's, potato is a much maligned food,
right?
Largely because we fry it and turn it into chips. But if you just take the sort of boiled or baked potato and look at that, it is a very satiating food. It's low in calories. So it's a great way to feel full on fewer calories.
And it actually has a lot more nutrients than people realize. Like even the average russet potato is pretty good if you just don't put a ton of butter on it or sour cream or whatever and just eat it for what it is. It's filling. This is something Chef AJ talks a lot about. Like if you just increase those low calorie density foods that are super high in fiber, you can fill yourself up. And I think kind of preloading before your meal so that you don't go into a meal starving, you're in a better place to make better selective decisions.
Definitely.
That's great advice.
Like big salads before you go into your main meal. Cauliflower, there is another one in there.
And being aware of the hidden calorie bombs, like what dressing are you using? What is this? It's all in the sauces and all that other stuff that seems benign, and those are the real killers.
And there's a study that speaks pretty much to that out of Johns Hopkins that looked at how many extra calories does someone consume if they eat out like 5-6 times a week versus someone who cooks at home almost every day. And they were able to determine that person eating out just 5 or 6 meals a week were eating on average 1,000 calories more per week, which over the course of the year is equivalent to around 7 kilograms of butter.
Right.
So, and probably what's happening there is that in restaurants and in cafes, there are a lot of hidden calories in the
Sure, they're just trying to make it taste good, and they're not showing you a nutrition profile on this food, and they're going to slather it with stuff whether they tell you or not, for the most part.
The chefs call it SOS, salt, oil, and sugar, and that's
what Alan Goldhammer calls it.
It's a secret weapon for them to make the food more appealing. But with that said, if your goal is to lose weight, trying to prep at home and have as much meals that you're making yourself will give you better control over what's in there.
Yeah.